Hey guys, in this video I want to answer another question from someone that wanted to know about how these macros are influenced by insulin. There's been just a lot of conflicting information, confusion, so I'm going to make it really simple in this one little video, okay? So there's three main macros, and macros are macronutrients: carbs, protein, and fat. Micronutrients would be like vitamins and minerals, things like that. These are macronutrients. Okay, there's many different types of carbs. We can take these carbs and list them on another scale called the glycemic index, which basically is the carbs' effect on raising blood sugars. And if something is high in fiber and low in not very sweet, it's going to be low on the list. Okay, so you have, vegetables are down here, and then you have berries, and then fruit, and then you have grains, and then refined sugars and processed foods up here. So it really depends on the type of carbohydrates. So the carbohydrates have the greatest effect on raising insulin, especially if it's refined sugars and starches. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so now let's talk about protein. Does protein increase insulin? Yes, to certain degrees. It really depends on a couple factors. Because if you're consuming a moderate or a small amount of protein, it's not going to trigger insulin that much, okay? So the more volume of protein you consume in excess, the more it's going to trigger insulin. Like when you start going over 8 ounces, 9 ounces, 10 ounces, 12 ounces, like you'd go to a restaurant and they bring you this steak, this 16 or 22 ounce steak, right? You talk about a massive amount of insulin spike, right? But it's also exaggerated when you add sugar or starch to that. So if you're adding a baked potato, a dessert, some sugar glaze, barbecue sauce, now it really will enhance the insulin. Now if we add on top of that MSG, which you would get in a fast food restaurant, because a lot of these fast food restaurants, they taste really good because they add the flavor enhancer, which is basically MSG, monosodium glutamate, and it dilates the taste buds and it makes it taste real good, but you really dramatically increase insulin. So if you're at a fast food place and you're doing a Coke with ice cream, with a burger, with fries, with high fructose corn syrup, ketchup, and a bun, oh my gosh, you're having a massive insulin spike. Okay, or you're at a Chinese restaurant and you're doing the white rice with all the sugary coating sauce over the protein and the breaded meats, massive spike in insulin because they too will also add MSG, usually hidden as modified food starch. It's the same thing. Okay, so the excess amount, the combo of what it's combined with, and number 3, very lean, low-fat proteins have a greater effect over insulin. There's something called the insulin index, and the insulin index are all the foods ranked in order of how much insulin they will spike. So the glycemic index is how fast a carbohydrate will spike blood sugars. Insulin index are all the non-carbohydrate foods that will increase insulin, like protein and fat, okay? So the less fat in that protein, the leaner it is, the more effect it has on insulin. So if you took, for example, whey protein powder, you're going to have the most insulin spike because there's like no fat in there. So that's interesting, versus something fattier like an egg yolk or the whole egg, for example. You mix the protein with the fat, it has a much lower effect on insulin than the low-fat protein. Okay, so that's another point about that. Then we get to fat. Fat has the least effect on insulin of these two, okay? And like a pure fat, like butter, for example, probably has like a 0 effect over insulin. Coconut oil, things like that. So the more fat something is, the lower it is on the insulin index scale. Okay, so you got that? All right, just one more point I want to bring up, and that is that every time you eat anything of any significance, I'm not talking about like, drinking water or unsweetened tea or your vitamins, things like that. I'm not talking about coffee. I'm talking about something that has some calories, okay? Every time you do that, you spike insulin. And of course, the more food that you eat, the more insulin you're going to spike. So It doesn't matter what it is. If it's a keto bomb that's all fat with a little protein, it's still going to stimulate insulin. Not as much as a pure carbohydrate like sugar or bread, something like that, but it's going to spike insulin to some degree. So this is the added layer that I'm going to add to these. When you eat anything, you're going to stimulate insulin. So even though fat has the least effect on insulin, just the fact that you eat it will trigger certain things in your stomach, certain hormones that will trigger the insulin on a cascade of effects. So the point is you want to cut down these, okay, low as possible. Moderate protein, make sure it's not too lean. And you can consume fat at the meal, but just don't eat it as frequently. So that's called intermittent fasting. So we basically reduce the frequency of eating, and you're going to be fine. Now, as you do this, and you consume 2 meals, yes, you're going to consume some fat, and you need some fat, and we need some insulin. We just don't need the excess amount. But over a period of time, when you start squishing these together where you have, let's say, a window of 4 hours, okay, and then you have 20 hours of fasting, even though you're going to stimulate insulin a little bit from some fat, some moderate protein, even some healthy vegetables, it's not going to be a problem because it's a minimal, it's not significant. What really gets people is the routine snacking every an hour and a half, even if it's a small meal, even if it's so-called healthy protein, even if it's some fat in there, you're just constantly raising the insulin. All right? Thanks for watching. So we've been getting a lot of success stories, but I don't have your success story yet. So click the link down below and upload your before and after. I want to actually hear about your success story. I want to see your before and afters. And every week we do featured success stories. So click the link down below and share your success.